Hello and welcome to the Nick Dinsmore YouTube channel. Please subscribe, comment, share, and give us a thumbs up. Follow former WWE superstar Eugene Nick Dinsmore on social media. Check out nickdinsmore.com.
Behold, the genius Lanny Poffo, the world's smartest man.
Sometimes what goes on behind the scenes is stronger than the soap opera on the video scope.
You're listening to the Genius Cast with Lanny Poffo and co-host JP Zarka of ProWrestlingStories.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the poet and limerick writing, motivational speaking brother of WWE Hall of Famer Randy Savage, the Genius, Leaping Lanny Poffo!
Hello again, wrestling fans. Welcome to the Genius Cast. My name is Lanny Poffo, and this is my co-host,
JP Zarka of ProWrestlingStories.com. It's a pleasure to have Nick Dinsmore with us here today on the Genius Cast. How are things going for you out there in Sioux Falls?
Fantastic. Sioux Falls is the best little city in America. We've got a 2% unemployment rate here, and I've got the only pro wrestling game in town in Sioux Falls, so I'm living the dream. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great, much better than I look. I'm glad to have you on the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interrogation.
Thank you. I'm excited.
We're excited too. Now, you had quite the resume in wrestling. In WWE, you were World Tag Team Champion with William Regal, as well as a 10-time OVW Heavyweight Champion and an 11-time OVW Southern Tag Team Champion. Take us back to the start. Where did you first find inspiration to become a wrestler?
Market Square Arena, Indianapolis, Indiana. Both Macho Man and Leaping Lanny were touring, and I got to go as a young child, and I watched WWE. I first started watching Saturday Night's Main Event, and I was hooked. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I realized that was what I wanted to do right then and there.
Did you get one of Lanny's Frisbees?
I wasn't close enough to get it, but I had a Macho Man school folder, and I stapled it to those sticks that you use when you're painting, how you mix up a can of paint. So I had my own little, I had like a picket sign, and it was a school folder.
I think I had a Macho Man folder in my Trapper Keeper as well. That's awesome.
The Trapper Keeper. Yeah, the Trapper Keeper.
You debuted in 96, but before then, how did you get into training? Who trained you? Where did you train?
Well, I started training in 1996, and then I was in the Louisville, Kentucky area. The Nightmare Danny Davis and the Hustler Rip Rogers were two of the people that trained me. And then when Ohio Valley Wrestling partnered with the WWE to train their developmental talent in 1998, I was then hired in 1999 to be a crash test dummy almost for the guys that they were sending there. And the first class of developmental talent included John Cena and Brock Lesnar and Batista, Randy Orton, Victoria, Shelton Benjamin, a whole big crew of guys that I was fortunate enough to help train when they were first hired.
Give us some stories of training these guys. I mean, we know how they turned out in the end, but when you first met the likes of John Cena, Batista, Randy Orton, did you think that they'd be on to greatness right away?
I assumed they would be, because most of the people that would be hired went on to become stars. There was a handful of bigger guys like that. I mean, just genetic specimens that didn't make it. But I became good friends with all of them, and at the time, I was just happy to be there. I mean, I never assumed that I would make it all the way to the WWE, and I was just excited to be a part of the group and help form the talent. And I mean, John Cena had the biggest legs I'd ever seen in my life, and Batista was just enormous, and Brock Lesnar was I mean, one of the nicest and most humble guys that I'd ever met. And Randy Orton was the son of Cowboy Bob Orton, so I was really excited just to take part in their training.
Now, Jim Cornette, he was a big fan of yours, and on numerous occasions he said that you were a great employee, fantastic babyface, and had good looks to boot. How was it working for Jim?
Jim was great. He was in the WWE office when I was hired in Connecticut, and then he moved back to Louisville to help the territory, if that's what we want to call it. And he's the one that really helped me go from being a wrestler to then understanding a little bit more entertainment and a little bit more storylines. And he was the one that really wrote Nick Dinsmore as the top babyface in Louisville and put me in a position to be, known around Louisville as a star. And he very much helped my career.
I mean, being a 10-time champion, give me some of the notable feuds that you had.
Doug Basham, who went on to be one half of the Basham brothers, as well as Danny Basham. And the Iron Man Rob Conway was my partner for a long time and until the Vicious Turn, and we had a long time feud. Probably the best matches I had in Louisville were against Conway and Doug Basham and Danny Basham, as well as the Hustler Rip Rogers. When I first started wrestling, Rip was still wrestling, and he was, I was a 19-year-old kid, and Rip was a 42-year-old bodybuilding man, fairly fresh off of WCW, and really helped mold me in the ring and taught me how to perform matches in the ring.
One of the best minds in the business. In fact, we just had him on the phone about a week ago for a future episode, and it's always good to hear his stories and listen to his advice.
Yeah, Rip, phenomenal. I can't give him enough credit to shaping Eugene. He's the one that really gave me the idea for Eugene, and I presented it to Vince McMahon on a suggestion that Rip gave me, and that was, he's without a doubt the reason for Eugene.
You mentioned Rob Conway. He was one half of the Los Conquistadores when you went up to WWF at some point, and you also had a stint as Doink the Clown. Now, younger me was a huge Doink fan, and I'm interested in hearing how that came about and what your experiences were like portraying the role of Doink.
Well, first and foremost, I think Doink the Clown needs to be in the WWE Hall of Fame.
No
I'm
doubt.
petitioning right now that Doink the Clown is a character worthy of Hall of Fame. I remember Rob and I went up, and we were extras. We were both under contract and just excited to be there. And they said, you two are going to wrestle Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman tonight on SmackDown. All right, but you're going to be conquistadors. But we didn't get the gold outfits. We got like a different, I don't know where, I've never seen them since, but we were two of the conquistadors over the history of the conquistadors. And then a pay-per-view came up, and they said, we need the conquistadors again. Oh, but we want Doink. So, Nick, let's have you play Doink. So I got to represent Doink on JBL's Barroom Brawl, as well as, I believe it was the episode of SmackDown. And it was, it was fun to do, and I got to put a little bit of my flavor. And if you ever watch it back, it's very much similar to the Eugene's mannerisms and kind of craziness. And it wasn't a whole lot of time on camera that I got to be Doink, but it was fun getting painted up. And then everybody thought it was the Brooklyn Brawler, but then the Brooklyn Brawler came out and beat up Doink. So it was exciting.
Did you ever get a chance to meet Matt Bourne?
I think I did. I believe I met him one time, but it was at one of the Insane Clown Posse Juggalo, one of their big events that they have that it was a little bit out of control and in the middle of a field. So I met him one time.
A bit blurry. So you had a lot of good experiences in OVW and, of course, a couple stints there. And you also did some time in WCW where you did a few jobs. Tell us about that.
I wrestled on the very first Brian Pillman Memorial Show, and that's where I met Terry Taylor. And Terry Taylor at the time was head of talent relations for WCW, and he ended up calling me in. And I did, I think, 13 or 14 events overall. I was on Nitro twice. I was on Thunder, I think, 3 times, and I did, 8 or 10 Saturday nights. And I might have been 21 or 22 years old, and I was just like wide-eyed and excited to be there. And I got to meet, all kinds of people and be on Nitro when they were ahead in the ratings in the Monday Night Wars. And just, it was a dream come true.
You were there in WCW when it was flourishing, and then you were in WWE a couple years later when you still had the likes of The Rock. Triple H was wrestling. Stone Cold was there for a short period of time. Hulk Hogan, that must have been amazing for you.
Well, it was Terry Taylor that got released by WCW and rehired by WWE as talent relations, and then he hired me to developmental contract in WWE, and I went up and did a lot of extras and a lot of jobs and stuff like that. And yeah, I met The Rock and met Hulk Hogan and eventually was in the ring with both of them. So it was I was hired in 1999, and I didn't debut as Eugene until 2004. So I had 5 years of not only training some of the future WWE stars, but doing jobs and learning as well.
You're the best of both worlds. Now, you mentioned that Eugene was your idea. Now, where did you get the idea from? What was the inspiration behind that character, and what was Vince's reaction like to hear your pitch?
Well, it was Rip Rogers that gave me the initial idea. Rip said, what about a wrestler that he's not very social. He can't tie his own shoes. He doesn't have the ability to really talk to girls backstage or guys. But the minute he gets in the ring, he can do stuff that he's seen since he was a kid. The minute the bell rings, he can turn it on. Because that was kind of the report on Nick Dinsmore. He couldn't do a very good promo, but in the ring he was flawless. I could do an hour Broadway and not use the same hold twice, not break a sweat, no sweat professional. But it was Rip that kind of gave me the idea, and I was at a point where, like I said, my friends were Rob Conway, Doug Basham, Danny Basham, and they were all got called up. They were all on the road. So all my friends in OVW were gone, but I was still training. I was kind of in a transition period, and I'd seen a lot of the talent. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. I'd seen a lot of the talent complain, and the next thing you know, they're called up to TV. A lot of the guys would threaten to quit, and the next thing you know, they're on the road. So I thought, well, I'll try it myself. So I told Doug Basham, I said, I think I'm going to quit and try to go to Japan, which I wouldn't have done because I was living at home. I was traveling less than an hour and a half to all the events that we went to, sleeping in my own bed every night, and I was the top babyface in the company. So, I had the best of everything, but I put that out there, and Doug Basham told Dean Malenko. Dean Malenko told Johnny Ace. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in a meeting with Vince McMahon and Stephanie. And Vince goes, I want to get back to character-based wrestling. And that's when I just blurted out the idea of Eugene. Great, we'll start on Monday. So then all of a sudden I had to come up with who this character was. But it was kind of like, I kind of learned it on the fly as I was doing it. My first match as Eugene was in St. Louis on a live event, and I wrestled Lance Cade. And thank goodness for Lance knew how to wrestle with a gimmick wrestler, because Lance made Eugene look so good. Eugene got beat in his first match, never been on TV, and the people were chanting his name at the end of the match. And I have to give all kinds of credit to Lance Cade, a very good friend of mine.
I love how, just a little bit of a lie, you saw what others were doing, and it worked in the end. I don't know if that's the best advice to follow today.
Yeah. I tell guys all the time, you might not do it in that fashion, but the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You have to put out there exactly what you want. Otherwise, sometimes it won't come to you.
Absolutely. Give them a reason to look at you. They don't want to lose someone like you. Now, the name Eugene, was that molded off of another person that existed? I've heard stories that there was a special needs son of one of the referees at WWE named Eugene. Were you named after this person, or was it just a name that someone came up with on the fly?
Lanny, have you ever met Eugene? I'm sure you met Eugene, right?
Yes, it's Bucky's son, and excellent kid. He had Down syndrome, and the thing is, the Bulldogs used to rib him mercilessly, and then Harley Race walked up and said, "Leave the kid alone." And guess what? Eugene liked the Bulldogs better than Harley. It's just it's the way it is, huh? And Moolah. Did you meet Eugene?
Yeah. They live in the Pittsburgh area, and he came to a couple events and got him all the Eugene merchandise, and he was really excited that there was a wrestler with his same name.
Yeah, it's he's a terrific guy, and I have very fond memories of Bucky and Eugene. But you know what I really noticed? You talk about Eugene in the third person. In other words, that wasn't you; that was your character. So that was good. I appreciate the fact that you understood that there's a line between yourself and the character you're playing. Otherwise, some people play Abraham Lincoln; they won't be satisfied till they get shot. Yeah,
it was. It really came out like when I would just start doing Eugene. Sometimes stuff would just happen in the ring that felt right, and the people would react. And really, it was like when Jim Carrey talked about playing Andy Kaufman, how he said it just kind of came out of him, and that's really how it felt. It's just something that, like, even now when I go out and perform, it's not the same. Like I don't know what it was, but like it was a moment in time, a magical moment in time that just really I created this body of work that I'm really proud of, and it just came out of me.
Believe it or not, you were in my final match of my life. and I keep telling myself that was it, but I'm such a whore. If the price is right, I'll be there tonight. You know how it is. But I'm going to be 60. I'm going to be 64 in December, and I don't want to have a chalk outline of my body in the ring. I love wrestling, but I don't want to die with my boots on. I want to die with my white socks and sandals.
Yeah, we had a huge sellout main event match in Minnesota. People were going crazy, screaming for the Genius, screaming for Lanny. They needed a poem, and he delivered big time.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Even if they don't scream for it, I'll give it to them anyway. I'll slide it in there.
Did you deliver a moonsault in that match?
No, I certainly did not. I believe those days are gone but not forgotten.
Now, the character of Eugene was very memorable, and I'm sure kids loved you, especially because you look like you're always having fun. Did you remain in character for any real-life interactions with fans or children?
All the time. On screen, I partnered with William Regal, and we also traveled together as well. We traveled. It was William and I and Tajiri. So it was like, Barnum and Bailey Circus as we were going around. If I noticed that somebody recognized us, immediately I would turn it on. And I usually did all the driving. So I would pull into the parking lot for the events, and fans would be lined up at the gate, like watching us. And so I would be swerving the car, and I'd pull it in and stop abruptly. Regal would fall out of the car holding his chest, like, "Oh my God, Eugene, I just got my driver's permit. I just got my permit," screaming and running around. And that was like some of the things that we did off screen were as memorable and as fun as the stuff that we did on screen.
Regal's one of my favorites. How was he just to pick his brain and just be around?
Oh, it was. That was like I watched William Regal as I was training and as I was a fan, because Nick Dinsmore wanted to be a wrestler, and I enjoyed watching Lord Steven Regal in WCW because he was an awesome wrestler. But then when I realized, how good of a performer he is, and I was lucky enough to be on screen with him. If it wasn't for Eric Bischoff and William Regal, Eugene would not have gotten as popular, because Eugene was written into a storyline with two great performers that elevated the character, and it was easy for me to just go out and have fun and play and let them direct the actual direction of what the segment was supposed to be. But yeah, to be traveling on 3, 4, 5 hour car rides and just pick his brain and talk to him was like instrumental in my career.
Tell me about Tajiri. How was he like to be with, outside of the ring and as a friend?
Oh, Tajiri's great. He didn't speak much in the car. He might say one or two things, but they were always like monumental. He was in the car one time, my wife and I and Tajiri, and he's riding, and he goes, "Stephanie, I rub you. You are rubbery." And he kept saying, "You are rubbery." And she's like, what is he trying to say? "Oh, sweetheart, he's saying you are lovely." He was very funny. And I feel like, when somebody's, when English is not their first language, and you can still bond over comedy and be able to tell jokes for somebody that, like, Tajiri could understand English and he could speak, but he couldn't enunciate that well, or at least he didn't act like he did. But to be able to tell jokes to one another is like very special. He and I are still good friends.
That's excellent. Now, you had the unique opportunity as Eugene to wrestle with many different movesets and use finishers from the legends like Stone Cold, The Rock, and Hogan. What was your favorite moveset or mannerism to portray?
Eugene was the ultimate fan, and he loved to do the moves of the people that he grew up watching. So yeah, like you said, I was in the ring with The Rock, I was in the ring with Hulk Hogan, I even pinned Vince McMahon. People would go crazy for the people's elbow, and the stunner always got a good reaction. Sometimes, more recently on independent shows, Eugene would get to a point in the match. What move do you want to see? Do you want to see RKO? Do you want to see John Cena? Do you want to see The Rock? Everybody says Macho Man, and I cannot do the elbow.
Neither can I. I tried it once, and I just sprained my whole right flank. I don't know how he did it.
Exactly. I'm like, oh my God, that has to be brutal each and every night to land that thing.
Well, toward the end, he couldn't get out of the car. He was having like, but that's the price you pay for the life you lead.
Absolutely.
Have you ever busted out some of these moves in the independents post WWE?
No, absolutely. That's all I got. That's what the people want to see. They want to see, Eugene, when you do the rock bottom, I'll do it for you. It's to be able to do all the moves that I watched growing up. When when I was training some of the guys in the developmental, I saw all these, Brock Lesnar and Batista and Cena, and I said, you guys need to be able to know how to take the rock bottom and the stunner and the people's elbow and all that. So let's work on it one day. And I remember it was Rip Rogers. Why are you guys doing those moves? You'll never do those. Joke's on you.
Have you talked to Rip about that afterwards?
Yeah, I talk to Rip every so often. I texted him the other day because I saw that he was going to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's a good listen. We can't wait to put it out. Now, the culture these days is a lot more sensitive than, say, like a decade ago. Do you think the Eugene character today would get the green light, or do you think in this sensitive culture would it stop it from thriving?
Well, the thing is WWE can get anything over that they want. They can make anything work. They took the mask off of Kane and then put it back on him, and it worked. So if they wanted Eugene to work and become world champion, they could definitely make it work. It was about a year ago, Sioux Falls hosted SmackDown Live. The first time I think live TV had been done here for WWE, and my wife got on as an extra. Dolph Ziggler was doing an impersonation of the Macho Man, and she got to be Miss Elizabeth. And I had heard that in a meeting with Vince, when one of the writers like, well, we're going to use Eugene's wife, and Vince goes, I've been thinking about bringing back Eugene. So if Vince wanted it to work, it would definitely work.
Do you get called to come in for some, anniversary shows or special appearances, or do you pop into WWE shows when they're in town?
They've only been here 2 or 3 times since we moved here in 2015, and I have not been, and they have not called, but I'm still waiting.
What brought you over to Sioux Falls?
This is where my wife is from. When I was on tour with WWE in 2004, she was on television here. She's a star in the Midwest in the Sioux Falls area. She was on television. She did news. She had her own country music television show. She hosted kids club events, and William Regal and I did a commercial spot for her country music show. And I met her, and that was it, hook, line, and sinker.
Now, over the years, you've had the chance to share a ring with so many greats. Who were amongst your favorite to work with?
I mean, my whole career has been my favorite. It's like a continual high spot that just keeps building. I mean, when they told me it was Sylvain Grenier that was friends with Pat Patterson that said, I think The Rock's going to come in tonight and do something with you in the ring. I'm like, no way. The Rock hasn't been on TV in 2 years, and there's no way he's going to come in for Eugene. And by hold, he came in that night in San Diego and blew the roof off the place. And it's like, that was probably the most electric that I've ever felt in the arena. They call him the most electrifying man in sports entertainment for a reason. I mean, it was just when he came out, the people went absolutely nuts. But then when they said, well, we're going to put you in the ring with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania, I'm like, oh my God, Staples Center in LA, incredible. And then when I wrestled Vince McMahon and Shane in a handicap match and pinned Vince, I mean, it's like these events, these moments are just like building. It's like, a kid from the Louisville, Kentucky area gets to, live his dream and wrestle guys that he's seen on TV and then, be on center stage with these people. It's, I've had all these great moments, but the best day of my life was the day that I met my wife.
Wow, that's a great thing to say. Happy wife, happy life.
Exactly.
Very sweet. Now, was there ever a time you were kind of starstruck or maybe even disappointed after meeting and working with someone during that time?
Not really. I mean, everybody that, in my opinion, that works for WWE is professional all the time. And I felt like I got along with everybody and felt like, I could work with anybody. And it was, I felt in my estimation, I want to make our match, our segment, the best that I can make it, the best it is on the show. So I tried to do everything to enhance anybody that was in the segment with me. I was never very selfish. I didn't care if I got anything or not because Eugene was still going to be popular regardless of if I got all my moves in or if I got 0. So I wanted to make sure that everybody else in the segment, shined them and got them, as over as I could.
You got over with your personality, let alone the wrestling. So that's what's just like Hacksaw Duggan. Hello, he electrifies the people and the Bushwhackers. They're in that variety too, where everybody's happy because they came.
Yes, exactly. It was I was fortunate enough to be able to talk and do backstage segments where they could meet Eugene and they could see my face. And that's what got me over more than any of the moves I did. But then once I got in the ring, once the bell rang, I could compete in there and I could do well. So it was like a plus.
Well, you must have been doing something right to have Jim Cornette on your side, who absolutely loves you, and Vince McMahon, who kept putting you in the ring with these legends. So obviously, you did a fantastic job.
I was in the right place at the right time. I was very fortunate, very thankful, very grateful.
Well, you were a good worker as well, and that always helps. Now, with the likes of Hogan, Taker, Triple H, Rock, you name it, around during the time you were there, what was the locker rooms like?
Well, like I didn't do a whole lot of extra work. I mean, maybe 5 to 10 times. So I wasn't really integrated in their locker room. But I know like the locker room in OVW was very, very brotherly, very friendly, very helpful. And then when I finally did get called up to TV, all the guys that were in the locker room then, you know, more recently, were the guys that were in the locker room in OVW. So it's pretty a seamless transition. It wasn't like there was no hazing or any kind of like, you know, anything like that because, you know, Cena, Batista, Orton, all those guys were in the locker room and they just accepted me right in. So I never had any kind of weird feeling. When I did wrestle for WCW, I felt like there was two locker rooms. There was the Stars and then there was, you know, all the Saturday Night guys. And I was just happy to be there. So like it wasn't, you know, anything personal to me, but I could definitely feel like there was a separation or, you know, these guys I remember walking in the locker room one time and there's all the NWO guys. I was like, okay, I'm in the wrong one. So I had to turn around and go back out and go to the other one.
Yep. Sorry, guys. Hello. Hi, by the way.
Yeah.
I have heard a few things about the WCW locker room and, you know, just eggshells. You know, sometimes people talk about that now. I mean, I don't know. I've never been on the inside, but, you know, current day WWE, everyone seems to be getting along. You don't have as many strong personalities or people trying to get themselves over. What do you think is best for business? Happy locker room or having a couple guys there who are, you know, look, we're here to fight to be the best and get out of my way?
Well, I feel like a harmonious locker room is probably the best, but I feel like you also have to have guys that are striving to be the number one guy, and that competition is going to sometimes ruffle some feathers. So as long as there's like, you know, like poor natured ribbing, I don't think like that should be anywhere. You know, guys that are you know, picking on people or any kind of bullying. But guys, you know, I'm going to go out and try to get myself over and be the star of the show and try to, you know, make myself the number one guy. I feel like that competition, especially with the guys in sports and sports entertainment and, you know, the nature of caliber of athletes, WWE hires. I mean, these guys are going to go out and they want to top each other each and every night. But if it can be a friendly, you know, rivalry, I think that's definitely what is best.
Absolutely. Now, looking back on your career, would you have preferred to run as a feared competitor, or are you happy with how your time with WWE went?
I feel like if someone's going to be a babyface or a heel, it really has to be what that person is. And although I can portray the heel, I didn't feel like that was my strongest hand. Because I feel like, you know, Eugene just came out of me and is a good-natured, fun-loving, you know, babyface, and I feel like that was my strongest suit. But I would have liked to have had a nice heel run. They tried to turn Eugene heel against Hacksaw, and the people didn't really accept it very well, although I wasn't given the opportunity to really, you know, get some vicious heat on anybody. So, I mean, I would have enjoyed it, but never say never. You know, I always come back and be the top heel if they wanted it to be, if they put the pencil to the paper.
Absolutely. I would love to see a heel Eugene.
Not me. I think you're doing great the way you were. You know, I can't see it. But prove me wrong. Go ahead, and I will admit it. I've been wrong a lot.
Yeah, that's the way I felt. I felt like, you know, the people didn't want to see Eugene. It was almost like, you know, Ronald McDonald trying to be a heel. It's the people, they wanted to laugh. They wanted to smile. I was, at the time that I started on TV, everybody wanted to be a strong, cool heel. It was post Stone Cold, post NWO, and everybody wanted to be a strong, cool heel. And I wanted to do completely the opposite. I was going to do, you know, comedy high spot and try to make people laugh and be a sympathetic underdog babyface because that was nowhere on the card. I wanted to be a kid character because the only kid character they had was Hurricane. But they had two shows at the time with SmackDown and Raw, So it's like, I knew that I could have one whole show and be a dominant, character for that target audience.
Now, do you feel your role as Eugene, did it help your post-WWE career, or do you feel kind of limited with what you could do character-wise outside of New York?
Oh, no, without a doubt. I mean, before Eugene, a handful of people in Louisville, Kentucky knew who Nick Dinsmore was. But after Eugene, every wrestling fan, every WWE fan in the WWE universe knows who Eugene is. So it definitely helped my career.
A friend of ours, Kevin Meeker, he does all the logos. He's got a YouTube page called Miserable Hair People. He asks, what was the worst crowd reaction you ever got, and why was it ECW One Night Stand?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it was the worst. It was a really good reaction, and I even got to read a poem. But yeah, I was the fans were handing Sandman Singapore canes to beat me with, and it was a hostile crowd, and I think they would have liked to see Eugene strung up by his toes. Inside as a performer, I'm like, this reaction is great, but it was a little bit scary on the edge of, I didn't want to go too far and get too much heat because, not that Eugene could start a riot, but it was a hostile environment for sure.
Have you been around, in WWE or not, what was the most hostile crowd you've been around? Did you see any riots or anything close to it?
It was that it was that crowd right there. When like John Cena and I are very good friends, and when he went out that night, I was standing right by the door because those people wanted to riot. I feel like when RVD won, those fans were almost let down because I feel like they wanted to fight. They wanted to hit the ring and they wanted to riot. And when they didn't get that opportunity, it was like, oh, well, we're happy, but we wanted to beat somebody up. And that was definitely the most hostile crowd I've ever been around.
What's life been like for you since leaving WWE? And tell us a bit about Midwest All-Pro Wrestling.
Well, Eugene was on TV from 2004. Last appearance was in 2009. I got rehired in 2012, and I was a coach in Orlando at the Performance Center until 2015 when my wife and I moved back here to Sioux Falls, where she's from, and I wanted to start my own wrestling company. It's kind of something I always wanted to do. I was very good at coaching, so I wanted to coach my own team and run my own territory. And I don't know, we've been in business here for 3 years now. We're building, we're making a name for ourselves, and we're sprouting the territory and touring, and really, it's a dream come true.
Let me tell you, it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. And that's just not me saying that. You have a reputation. Everybody loves you. And I can't say the same for JP or myself, but I'm just kidding. Okay. No, really, I hear great things about you, and I'm very, very proud of you, your success, and it hasn't gone to your head. You're a performer that can play all characters. You can be a heel. You can be a babyface. I didn't mean to say that you couldn't be a heel. They said Leaping Lanny could never be a heel, and I proved them wrong. But I had to reinvent myself, and that's what you have to do if you want to be a heel.
Absolutely. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
What was it like when you worked as a trainer in NXT?
Like the Performance Center, I'm sure everybody's seen the videos on it and the specials that they've done, but it was a multi-million-dollar complex patterned after the NFL training centers. And it was like the best of the best. You could at any point go into the coach's locker room and have 60 years worth of knowledge from all the coaches that were in there, and then all the technology that WWE has. They can pull up pretty much any video instantaneously, and you could talk at the time when Dusty Rhodes was there, and then Terry Taylor was there, and Billy Gunn, and all these people that you could draw experience from. I was just excited. I was almost like one of the talent because I was learning so much. It enhanced my career as a coach, as a performer, but as a promoter as well.
The current batch of up-and-coming wrestlers really got it good if they're in the WWE system. It's nothing like how it was in the past, is it? No.
Like in OVW, the building that we ran was modest, to put it nicely. There was no heat. There was no air conditioning. And it was hot during the summer and cold during the winter, but that's the way you learned. You learned in the ring by experience, and now you've really got the best of the best. I don't necessarily know which one is better, but what WWE has now is definitely spectacular. And it's the story that I heard was when Triple H was transitioning from primarily an on-air performer to office, that Vince had him go around to each of the departments. So you're going to go to marketing, you're going to go to payroll, you're going to go to this and this, and give a report back on how that department works. And from what I heard, Triple H is like, well, everything is spectacular. It all has a mark of excellence, WWE mark of excellence, but that developmental system's a little bit messed up because, I mean, at the time it was an independent wrestling company that WWE was using to train their talent. And then Vince goes, okay, well, you'll be in charge of that. So all of a sudden now Triple H got to reinvent the whole developmental system and give it that mark of excellence that WWE has across the board on everything.
I never heard that Triple H went and witnessed all the different rules that WWE was doing, going into the finance section, going into the performance side. I think that's great. Obviously training him up to take the helm at some point down the line.
Well, I mean, it was a transition for a lot of us to go from, like I said, an indie wrestling company to then the bright lights of WWE, and to make that, from the get-go, if you're going to hire world-class talent and world-class, performers, you can't send them to a building that has mice and rats and has no air conditioning. Although I love that building, and that's where I was trained, I understood, Triple H is like, we have to set that mark of excellence, from the minute we hire. If you're going to get some guy that was in the NFL and he's going to come in here, it's difficult to, go a step down. I hope that comes off correctly because I don't want to diminish anything the way I trained, but it's that mark of excellence that WWE has across the board that makes them the number one sports entertainment company of all time.
Absolutely. You can only make a first impression once.
Exactly.
Now, I want to give the interviewer role over to you now. You mentioned on Twitter that you've listened to all of our shows. Thank you, by the way. That's amazing. And that you have some questions of your own for Lanny. Take it away.
Lanny, why did ICW end up in Lexington?
Damned if I know. No, really. I was the last guy on the squad. I was supposed to go to Los Angeles. I was all set to have an angle with the Guerreros thanks to my friendship with Rowdy Roddy Piper. Have you ever met him?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite pictures I have is me with Hot Rod.
Yeah, he said, I was there in Portland, Oregon, and he said, Lanny, I got an idea for you. You go to Los Angeles, you work with the Guerreros, and, it'll be great for you. So I was working on my Spanish, so I could insult the people, get cheap heat, probably get stabbed and everything. And right when I was about to go, I had to call up Mike LaBelle and say, I'm sorry, I can't go. I have to go to the ICW. And they were in Nashville, but then they decided to go to Lexington, Kentucky. It was not my decision. And then that's how we wound up there. I was the beta male of the team. Everybody was alpha, but now that everybody's gone, I've become the alpha male because of no competition. But anyway, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And I do love Lexington. It's a tremendous place, just like you love Sioux Falls. Because
I was born in Lexington, and I grew up in Louisville. And as I grew up, I met many people that had met, the Poffo family as the territory. Did you guys live in Lexington?
Yes. Now, I lived there for about 6 years. Now, let me ask you, you said you met me at Market Square Arena. That's in Indianapolis. When were you there? When were you in Hoosier?
So I was born in Lexington, and then I recently lived in Louisville, but my dad worked for a company that was based in Greencastle, Indiana. So we lived near Indianapolis until I was about 11, and then we moved to Louisville. But that was the closest arena that I got to go to as a kid was Market Square Arena.
So you're a Hoosier at heart.
I'm both. I'm a Wildcat. I'm a Bluegrass and a Hoosier as well. Yes.
Well, you've been such a great interview. I want to do something for you, and just sit back and bathe in all the luxury of my poetic voice. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see a flickering candlelight, still burning bright through the sycamores for me. The new mown hay spreads all its fragrance on the fields I used to roam. When I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, how I long for my Indiana home. Thank you so much.
Yay!
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Exactly. All right. So on a previous episode, you were remarking what a quality human being Randy Savage was, and I agree. And you had said that he had never been arrested. I've heard a story of an incident in a Waffle House in Nashville.
Awesome. I'm glad you brought this up.
No, I never said he had never been arrested. I said he had seldom been arrested.
Seldom been arrested.
Did you see how he slipped that word in now?
I slipped that in there. No, he was arrested in a Waffle House, I think. Do you know the story, or should I tell it? You better tell it, and I'll correct you.
Supposedly Rip Rogers and Dutch Mantell were there, so I've heard it from both of them. But a gentleman came in that had just been married, and he was yelling. He was being loud in the Waffle House, saying, "I just got married." And apparently Randy was hungry, and he didn't want to hear it, and he piped off to him, and a little argument ensued. And I don't know exactly what happened, but then the police were called, and Randy was apparently held up with a Waffle House steak knife, and they let the police dog go on him. And he didn't sell for any of the police officers, but he had to sell for the dog.
Well, I'll tell you what. Boys and girls, if you're listening, please don't resist arrest. And if you ever have to go to court, don't be held in contempt of court. So there comes a times when you should be macho, but when the police are there, leave that macho be. Just let them go. Let them. And you have the right to remain silent. How's that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. What do you think they call me, the genius? Yeah.
That's one of my favorite stories. We actually have that up on ProWrestlingStories.com. And, you know, it goes from the beginning where he just wants to sit down and enjoy his food in peace. And then, you know, this cowboy comes in, he just got married, and he's gloating to the staff. I want to know why the guy who just got married was at the Waffle House and not with his bride. The
only thing wrong with your story, Eugene, is that he was no gentleman. You say a gentleman walked into a Waffle. You were being nice, but I'm sure it was one of those rednecks. But I wasn't there. But if I had been there, you can be sure that I would have been under the furniture.
And you don't mess with those police dog bites. My God, that must have hurt. How was the healing process for Randy? Do you know, Lanny?
I don't know. You know something? I never felt comfortable to ask him. Okay,
fair enough.
It's like it was a bad day at Black Rock.
Yeah, check that out on ProWrestlingStories.com, guys. Just look up Randy Savage Waffle House, and it'll show up. Before we go, do you keep in touch with any of the guys these days?
I mean, there's a few guys. Like I'll talk to Rob Conway or Rip Rogers. I'll text John Cena every now and then. When I was a coach, I got to know like Braun Strowman and Elias and Chad Gable. So anytime I see those guys on TV, I'll usually send them a text, you know, to tell them how good they're doing. So, you know, there's a few guys. And then as well as promoting Midwest All Pro Wrestling, I brought in, you know, Carlito came in, X-Pac came in, brought in Tatanka, Eric Bischoff came in. The people of Sioux Falls are dying to see the Genius. So there's going to be a day when the Genius comes in and reads the poem right here in Sioux Falls.
Well, I think Eric Bischoff can drive from where he lives, can't he?
It's well from where he is in Wyoming, right? It was a good 12-hour drive, but it's yeah, you know, it's pretty far, I think.
Oh, okay. I didn't know because, you know, the West has got bigger states and bigger rectangles. So it's hard for me to tell. Yes. So I'll tell you what a great interview you were. Wasn't he great, JP?
Loved it. Where can people find you on social media?
Eugene is on Twitter at the letter U, Gene. Dinsmore is my last name, Dinsmore, at Eugene Dinsmore. Midwest All Pro Wrestling is at Midwest All Pro, as well as Facebook Midwest All Pro, our YouTube channel Midwest All Pro. I'm pretty. I do a lot of the tweeting with Eugene, and I'm constantly on Midwest All Pro trying to build our social media fan base.
Well, we're going to do our best to plug that. And, you know, you've been an awesome guest. Thank you so much for all your support that you've given our show. And we hope to have you on again soon. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we let you go?
Lanny, one thing. Thank you for deciding to put Randy in the Hall of Fame, or allowing WWE to put him in the Hall of Fame. I've heard you talk. It was kind of a decision that you had to make. And for the fans that grew up, you know, loving watching Macho Man, it was. I would like to say thank you, and I feel like you made the right decision.
Well, thank you, because you know, that means a lot to me, because Naturally, once I make up my mind, I'm full of indecision. It wasn't what Randy wanted, but I thought that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, as in Star Trek. You were talking about the Hall of Fame. I believe that Eugene should be in the Hall of Fame, and I got a question for you. Where the hell is Rick Martel? Why isn't he in the goddamn Hall of Fame?
Exactly. Rick Martel was one of my favorites growing up. I like the Can-Am Connection. I like the AWA World Champion Rick Martel. I like the Scent Arrogance, the model Rick Martel.
Yeah, they said he couldn't be a heel. He sure proved him wrong.
Absolutely. He's phenomenal across the board.
Yeah, I wish they'd just put him in the Hall of Fame before he expires. They always wait for people to die. I want to see them get it now. It's like people say I had a good speech at the Hall of Fame. Wouldn't it have been better if Randy were there? He should have given the last oh yeah. And that would have been, that's what he deserved, and that's what the people deserved. I want to say thank you for your contribution to the wrestling. You brought joy to millions of people, and you brought joy to our podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Been a pleasure. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I feel like a broken record here because every time we have a guest on our show, I say they're the nicest person in professional wrestling. But I got to say, Nick Dinsmore was an absolute consummate gentleman, and he really gave us some great stories.
That's right. And you know why? Because we never interrupted any of our guests. We let them talk. And that, makes me mad when you ask a question. It's like Merv Griffin's show, like, hey, listen, give me a chance to answer the question. We let him go. He's great on the mic. So let's, like Jim Duggan and Rip Rogers, you don't have to interrupt them. You can just let him go.
The one thing I took from it was that he was a fan before going into WWE, and he had the chance to wrestle with all the greats. And I know if I was in that situation, I would have been starstruck. And for him to go out there and absolutely just do a phenomenal job, as you said, there is a place for him in the WWE Hall of Fame, and I hope that we see that soon.
I think it would be a big pop for the crowd.
And he's still young, there's still life left in him. So perhaps one day soon we'll see him on WWE television.
He certainly deserves it.
That's right. Before we close on this week's episode, do you have any words for our listeners?
Yes, I do. Be humble when victorious. Be noble in defeat. Be there when your neighbor hasn't got enough to eat. Try to love your enemies and always be aware that in the Super Bowl of life, the tortoise beats the hare.
Please subscribe, comment, share, and give us a thumbs up. Follow former WWE superstar Eugene Nick Dinsmore on social media. Check out nickdinsmore.com.